Good morning. Good morning and Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam. Good morning.
I am very thankful to Professor Dr. Samina Khalil for sparing a very precious time for us. Let me have a brief introduction of Professor Dr. Samina Khalil. Dr. Samina Khalil is a research professor at Applied Economics Research Center, University of Karachi. She is also the former director of this center. Professor Khalil was nominated as member of the Economic Advisory Council of the Prime Minister of Pakistan in 2022. She is also member Steering Committee Planning Commission of Pakistan in 2023 and member Steering Committee Ministry of Poverty Alleviation Government of Pakistan in 2023. Professor Khalil is a development economist with PhD in Environmental Economics and Management from the University of York, UK, and MPhil in Economics of Developing Countries from Cambridge University, UK. Dr. Khalil has worked as consultant to a number of international agencies like World Bank, IUCN, ADB, WWF, etc., and have undertaken various research and policy-oriented studies related to issues in environmental economics, development economics, and natural resource management and sustainable development. She is widely traveled and has to many countries in Europe, Asia, Africa, Latin America, and USA to attend academic conferences, seminars, and workshops. There are a number of publications on her record as refereed journal and articles in weekly magazines. If I continue to introduce Dr. Samina Khalil, then it will take much time. So I request Dr. Samina Khalil to please proceed now so we can benefit from your valuable suggestions and valuable discussions. Dr. Samina, over to you, please.
Okay. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you so much, Dr. Tayyab. I'm really grateful to the School of Economics and Finance and Center of Economic Planning and Development, Manhaj University, Lahore, for inviting me for this webinar lecture on a very important topic, which is establishing the nexus between sustainability, environmental and climate change. And more important thing is that this is about towards inclusive education and research. How are these very important topics in the contemporary times? It should be included in every level of education, especially at the higher level. And more importantly, again, the research work needs to be done in these important areas of development. So I like to start off by defining sustainable development. About engaging the world's education systems to work for a more sustainable future. The proper documented definition of the sustainable development is that development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And this definition was given and documented in a report, which is quite a kind of a very mammoth report, and it was published in 1987 by the World Commission on Environment and Development, 1983. And this is a very comprehensive kind of a definition telling us that we should not be developing at the cost of the future generation. So now, what is sustainability itself? Sustainability is basically is as a term chosen to bridge the gulf between development and environment. And while environmentalists, they think that the ecological sustainability, when they talk about sustainability, it is basically in a business context, and it can be used to point out the economic sustainability. In the economic literature, it's been estimated that there are over 300 definitions of sustainability, and in its broadest sense, it is the capacity to endure, to maintain a process of situation over time. So sustainability can be explored and managed in various references of time and space without different context of environmental, social, and economic order. So now, what is the relationship again? This relationship between sustainability and development is the ability of the environmental system, that is sustainability, will be affected if the output means the development itself, is not based on the principles of sustainable development. So it's a kind of a very comprehensive definition of sustainability and sustainable development. What actually sustainable development means for the present times? Is there any background to it in history? Well, there is, because we say there are certain intellectual underpinnings. Here you can see few names like Thomas Malthus, a very famous development economist, who wrote an essay on the principles of population. And it was revised in 1803 as an essay on the principles of population, with an inquiry into prospects representing, with respect to the removal or mitigation of the evils. Now, what is the Malthusian population theory of this era, this period, 1798? Actually, Thomas Malthus between the rate of growth of population, which increases geometrically, and the rate of growth of agriculture. The students of development economics and other scholars, they very well know the definition. This is a very precise definition of theory of, I mean, in a very concise form, Thomas Malthus' theory. And he said that the rate of growth of agriculture, he actually means the food part of it, which increases only arithmetically. So he then explores how population had historically been kept in check. Now the question is, what motivated Thomas Malthus for this kind of a work, which is very, very important. The original of his father, and Rousseau, a very famous name as well, regarding the society. So Malthus was basically talking about the society's improvement or development. Now, if we start with a zero population growth, that is often the goal of demographic planners and environmentalists, who basically believe that reducing population growth is essential for the health of ecosystem. So they were actually concerned with the ecosystem at that time. Preserving cultural traditions and the ethnic diversity is a factor for not allowing human population levels or rates to fall too low. So now this is something very important to be noted, that in 1973, I mean, I actually talked about Thomas Malthus, but coming to this year of 1973, a renewed burst of Malthusianism was published by the Club of Rome. And what is basically this Club of Rome? It was founded in 1968 in Rome. And this is a platform of diverse thought leaders and who identified holistic solutions to the complex global problems and issues. So, but there is a book which is titled as Limits to Growth by Donella Meadows in 1972. And what is this book is all about? The Club of Rome, it stimulated considerable public attention with the first report of this club, The Limits to Growth, as I said, and it was published, as I said, it's in 1972. Its computer simulations, it suggested that economic growth could be continued indefinitely. Intellectual underpinnings. So there is another institute which is a very important one, and it was established in 1974, World Watch Institute. And their basic work is that they publish an annual State of the World series and the associated working papers. And these are basically, they're almost always talking about the sustainability and the sustainable development and case studies in different countries. So next, please. I like this term, and I really, when I was going through the literature about sustainable development, I came across this term that cornucopias. Cornucopias is I think it's not an English term, but it has come into English vocabulary a few centuries back. It is basically the horn of a goat, and this horn it signifies the plenty. And this cornucopia is used purely for Thanksgiving decorations. And you remember, I think we all know that there is a day which in the Western societies they celebrate as a Thanksgiving Day. So this is kind of a very decoration thing, the horn of a goat, which means that plenty. Well, and a bountiful harvest, and by extension, an appreciation for both these things. So there is a school of thought referred as cornucopias, which arose to dismiss Malthusian's claim, and they see ever growing population enjoying ever more benefits from the planet. So they're not actually talking like Malthus said about the doomsday, that if the population keeps on increasing, and one day would come that it will not geometrically a progression of the population. One day it will not be able to, satisfy the arithmetic progression in the food supply from the agriculture sector. So this is what Easton was for in 1981. He believed necessity is the mother of invention. So, we know that this is a very important factor, and asserted that the increase in the population pressure acts as an incentive to developing new technology. So it's not about the doomsday scenario. So, the human beings are capable enough to rectify this kind of a situation. So the Malthusian's notion that the food supply increases in an arithmetical progression is based on a very static economic law, and at any one time, that is the law of diminishing returns. But the Malthus could not foresee, as they say. Even the Julian Simon in 1981 and Wilfred Beckerman, they also disagree with Malthus, and they say that he could not foresee, the Malthus could not foresee the unprecedented increase in the scientific knowledge and agricultural invention over a period of time. So which has stated the law of diminishing returns. So consequently, the food supply has increased much faster than in arithmetical progression. So Malthus has been proved wrong, not only in the advanced countries, but also in the developing countries as well. Like, for example, in India, maybe in China as well. And India and Pakistan, we have the experience of Green Revolution. But ever so long ago, even the Karl Marx in 1848, he saw ever expanding consumption possibilities, and based surprisingly upon the enterprise of the capitalist in promoting globalization. So in the book, The Next 200 Years, Karl Marx, also, he was basically not a capitalist. We all know that. He was not the proponent of the capitalist economy, but he could see the ever-expanding consumption possibilities. In fact, Malthus, who forewarned them of the evils of the overpopulation, what happened? What was the reaction of the Malthus theory? That it made the people of Europe wiser, and they started adopting measures towards it off. The very fact that people use preventive checks like late marriages and the various contraceptive and birth control on an extensive scale, it proves the vitality of the Malthusian law. So what I'm trying to say is that it's not like Malthus was completely wrong. Whatever he said about more population and the less food, that really helped as a preventive tool for the people in future to take care of it. Now, the news from the UN agencies is typically mixed. Why it is typically mixed? Because first of all, the good news is that we can feed more than 6.5 billion people with enough food to keep them functioning. Now I think it is going to be around 8. This is a very conservative figure of 6.5. It could be nowadays, we know that it is around 8 billion and moving towards very rapidly towards the 9 billion people on this planet. And if we want to keep them functioning each day of the year, then we can feed more than this amount. But the bad news is that we appear to be seriously compromising our life support system to accomplish this. So this is really a bad news. I mean, the resources are not enough to keep the pace of population increase and feed them too as well. So the Beckman was another person, I mean, the economist who sees the future as not resource limited, but limited by humans' inability to get the economic institutions right. Now, this is another factor, that institutions, if they are not working well and there is a limit to their growth, then probably another issue would be created. Next, please. So there are 9 ways to achieve sustainability. For example, I mean, this is very interesting to know that can we achieve sustainability? Well, let's leave everything in the pristine state. Now return it to its pristine state, or return it to its pristine state, which is not possible. I mean, it does not exist. The possibility of having the era of when there was no population at all, the human beings were not existing, this we cannot return to it. So develop so as to not overwhelm the carrying capacity of the system. This is also maybe possible, may not be possible. It depends. Sustainability will take care of itself as economic growth proceeds. Well, this is Kuznets' theory that as the economy grow or the development takes place, then a point would reach from where the economy would start the pollution or the disadvantages of the development, they start taking care of themselves and the sustainability would be restored. The polluter and victim, they can arrive at an efficient solution of them. Coase theory, this is also a very important theorem. And he says that, well, the polluter, those who are polluting the environment, they can basically and the victim is those who are suffering from the pollution. It means that the industrial period, the outcome of the industrial period, the negative impact of the industrialization, and the people who suffer from the pollution coming out of this production activity, they would arrive to some kind of an efficient solution. Well, another point is that it may happen and it may not happen. Let the markets take care of it. This could be possible. Well, let the private sector work for it. And maybe if there is a price system existing in the market of pollution and the production, it can take care of it itself. Internalize the externalities. Externalities means, as the student of economics, of welfare economics know, that it is basically something which people have to pay for another for the action of somebody else. So it could be internalized. Let the national economic accounting system reflect defensive expenditures. Well, this is also possible. This is absolutely possible. It can happen, but there has to be the will of the national accounting. So those who are working on this national economic accounting system. Reinvest rents for non-renewable resources, weaken strong sustainability, and then leave future generations to options or the capacity to be. So these are some kind of ways to achieve sustainability, but I would say that not all of them are workable, and there are a host of factors that are affecting at the same time, which needs to be taken care of too. So, okay, next, please. Well, the emergence of environmental and resource economics. How this subject of, or the this idea of environmental and resource economics came up. I think the classical economics, the contribution of Smith, Malthus, Ricardo, and Mill to the development of natural resource economics, that is established in their work. While the emergence of natural resource and environmental economics as a distinct sub-discipline, it has been relatively recent, and which is concerned with the substance of the natural resource and environmental issues, and has much earlier antecedents. So what I'm talking about is that we should not take sustainable development or talk about environmental issues or talk about climate change as something which has erupted in the last, let's say, half a century time period. No, it's not like that. It's a very old issue, but the classical economists, they were also thinking on the same lines. Like, for example, it is evident, for example, in the writings of the classical economist, for whom it was a major concern, that this label classical, it identifies a number of economists writing in the 18th and the 19th centuries, which is a period during which the Industrial Revolution was taking place, at least in Europe and the North America, and agriculture productivity was growing rapidly. So the recurring theme of political economic debate, it concerns the appropriate institutional arrangement for the development of the trade and growth also. Well, when we talk about Adam Smith's belief in the efficacy of the market mechanism, what Smith was trying to say is that he was the first writer to systemize the arguments for the importance of markets in allocating resources. You know, it's so important, the allocation of resources in the economy. We economists, basically, when we go to the deeper and we develop insight into and dig into the deeper working of the economic system, we talk about the markets in allocating resources, the importance of markets. And although his emphasis was placed on what we would call the dynamic effects of markets, his major work is an inquiry into the nature and causes of the wealth of nations. You know that very well. And then a belief in the efficacy of the market mechanism is a fundamental, as I said, organizing principle of the policy prescription of the modern economics. So natural resources were seen as important determinants of national wealth and its growth. I've talked about Thomas Malthus, what he was talking about as a classical economist, and David Ricardo. David Ricardo talked about Malthus' assumption of a fixed stock of land. It was replaced by a conception in which land was available in parcels of varying quality. John Stuart Mill, the period is 1806 and 1873. He was actually one, in his writing, he finds a full statement of classical economics as its culmination. Mill's work utilizes the idea of diminishing returns, but he recognizes the countervailing influence of the growth of knowledge and technical progress in agriculture and production. So, okay, next, please. The neoclassical economics, we know the concept of marginal theory and value. So a series of major works published in 1870, in the period of 1870s, it began the replacement of the classical economist by classical economics, by what subsequently became known as non-classical economics. So one outcome of this was a change in the manner in which the value was explained. And how actually the value was explained at that time. Classical economics, this economist, they saw value as rising from the labor power, and it was embedded directly or indirectly in output, a view which actually found its fullest embodiment in the work of Karl Marx. Neoclassical economists, they explain value as being the determined in exchange, so reflecting preferences and the cost of production. So the concept of price and value, it ceased to be extinct. It ceased to be a very, very distinct one. So moreover, what we are trying to say is that I'm establishing the fact that the previous notions of absolute scarcity and value that were replaced by a concept of relative scarcity and with relative values, and which was determined by the forces of supply and demand. So this change is emphasized. It paved the way for the development of welfare economics. Okay, we know about this development of new classical general equilibrium theory, and in so doing, it provided a rigorous foundation of the concept of efficiency, optimality, and being employed in environmental economics. Alfred Marshall, a neoclassical economist in the period of 1842 to 1924, he has written in the Principles of Economics that he was basically responsible for elaboration of the partial equilibrium supply and demand. It was a very important work that Alfred Marshall did in his time. So next, and according to the Keynes, John Maynard Keynes, period 1883 to 1946. I think according to his economic theory, the government should increase demand in order to boost growth. So the Keynesians hold the belief that the primary driving force in an economy is consumer demand. Keynesian, the primary driving force. Okay. And he was concerned to explain and provide remedies for the problem of persistent high levels on. So he was talking about recession and unemployment, but it has to do greatly with the resource allocation as well, right? So, I mean, if these neoclassical economists, they were not talking directly about the sustainability of the development, they were indirectly talking the same thing. Okay, next. The students of economics, they have, you must have read about the what welfare economics is all about. Welfare economics, it attempts to provide a framework in which the normative judgments they can be made about alternative configurations of the economic activity. So in particular, attempts to identify circumstances under which it can be claimed that one allocation of resource is better in some sense than the other. And you must be aware of the utilitarianism, which has the social welfare consisting of some weighted average of the total utility levels, and talking about the enjoyment of such a utility of all individuals in the society. The problem of okay, I think we need to move faster. Okay. One important point is that one manifestation of the market failure is the phenomena of externalities. Okay, we think that the market is the basic entity or a place where the supply and demand works very well. But the problem of pollution, it is a major concern of environmental economics. And as I said, one manifestation is the market failure. And this market failure, it happens because of the different externalities, which was not actually taken into account before going into the different resource allocation as well as the production activity or some kinds of economic activities as well. So the problem of pollution, that is a major concern of environmental economics. So it first attracted the attention of the economist as a particular example of the general class of externalities. As I said, important early work, the analysis of externalities and market failure is to be found in Marshall's writing. And also, the first systematic analysis of pollution as an externality is to be found in Pigou. In 1920, Pigou was the person who very extensively dealt with this issue of environmental pollution, and he suggested some remedies as well. However, the environmental economics, it did not really take off until the 1970s. Next, please. Ecological economics is also the part of those who are studying environmental economics. They should be knowing about what ecological economics is also. It is relatively a new interdisciplinary field, but in the 1980s. By the way, I really need to say at this point that environmental economics, ecological economics, development economics, talking about sustainability, everything is very interdisciplinary. You cannot actually talk about economics per se, but you need to talk, you have to have some knowledge, basic knowledge of the not only social sciences, but also the physical sciences. And because environment is it encompassing everything on the planet. So ecology is definitely a part of it. So the problem of important early work in the analysis of externalities, as I said, is oh, I mentioned it, Pegu. The distinguishing characteristic of ecological economics, what are these? Is that it takes as its starting point and its central organizing principle the fact that the economic system is part of the larger system that is planet Earth, right? So it is basically the umbrella of environment which is affecting the planet as a whole. And it starts from the recognition that the economic and environmental systems, they are interdependent. And they studies the joint economy environment system in the light of principles from the natural sciences, particularly thermodynamics and ecology. As I said, that it is the approach that the economists, environmental economists needs to have, which is interdisciplinary. Next, please. Now, what are the fundamental issues in the economic approach to resource and environmental issues? The fundamental issues are the property rights, efficiency, and government intervention. And I think there are several books written on these topics. And good students, those who are interested in these topics, they can grab a good book from good library. And also the ebooks are also available on internet. And you will have a great I mean, you can teach yourself. I mean, it's self-teaching kind of a thing if you go through the ebooks, and it will explain you what property rights are, what is the efficiency and government intervention issues are related to the economic approach to resource and environmental issues. So in such circumstances, price signals fail to reflect true social cost and benefits. So what is happening in the prima facie, the case exists for government policy intervention to seek efficiency gains. So on the one side, we are talking about the markets that helps in creating this issue of environmental problem solution to the environmental issues. But on the other hand, we are also saying that if the market fails, the price signals fail to reflect the true social cost and benefits. So the role and the limits of valuation in achieving efficiency. The absence of price for a resource or external effect, it does not mean that it has no value. Clearly, if well-being is affected, a value is either positive or negative, depending on whether well-being is increased or decreased. So in order to make all allocatively efficient decisions, these values, they need to be estimated in some way. So returning to the power station example, for example, as I said before, government might wish to impose a tax on, let's say, sulfur emissions, which are the most prominent emissions from the power stations, so that the polluters may pay for the environmental damage and hence reduce the amount of it to the level that goes with allocative efficiency. But this cannot be actually done unless the proper value can be put on the otherwise unpriced emissions. So environmental economists, their job is to put value to these unpriced emissions, put value to all these resources that are freely available to human beings. So it's a big job that all these environmental economists need to do. Okay, next, please. Now, this is a very clear picture, very clear figure, which is showing the origins of this sustainability problem. It is very, very clearly telling us the economy environment interdependence, how the economy is dependent on environment and economic activity in the natural environment. And this is very, a schematic representation of the two-way relationship between the interdependence of economy and environment. The outer heavy black line box, it represents the environment, which is a thermodynamically closed system. So in that, it exchanges energy, but not matter with its environment. The environment, it receives input of solar radiation, and some of that radiation is absorbed and drives environmental processes, but some is reflected back into space. So this is represented by arrows crossing the heavy black line at the top of the figure, and the matter does not cross the heavy black line. The balance between energy absorption and the reflection determines the way the global climate system functions. So I think it's a very, very easy picture to be comprehended. The energy in and out arrows, they are showing passing through three boxes, which represent three of the functions that the environment performs in relation to the economic activity. The fourth function represented by this heavy black line box itself is the provision of the life support services and those services which hold the whole functioning system together. You can very easily note that the three boxes, they intersect one with another, and the heavy black line passes through them. This is to indicate that the four functions interact with one another. So this figure actually is showing you the economic activity located within the environment and involving production and consumption both, and both of which they draw upon environmental services. And this figure has been taken from Perman's book, a very good book on environmental economics, which is very clearly telling you about how some of the output from the production is added to the human-made reproducible capital stock, and the services which are used they together with the labor services and production. Well, this also shows the production using a third type of input, resources extracted from the environment. So the production gives rise to the waste inserted into the environment, and so does the consumption. So this is what this figure is telling you all about. Next, please. A very important term of environmental Kuznets curve. As I said before, that Kuznets was the first person who came up with the definition of what he was trying to say. I mean, it's not a definition, it was a concept that first what will happen is that the countries would grow through their economically, they grow and get developed. And in that period, these countries are going to face the pollution problem. But when they reach at a certain level and the peak level of their development, and then they would have enough resources to invest in the pollution abatement technology, and they would start taking care, because now they have enough resources for themselves, monetary resources. They can spend those resources on cleaning the environment and cleaning the pollution. So the whole system would become much more better and pollution free. But here, these figures are telling you the world population projections. It could be higher. I mean, this is from 2000 to 2150. So these are, this is like in future period, from 2050 to 2100, 50 years, and then one more account of additional 50 years from high to medium to low. This is showing you that, well, it is predicted contribution to the world population growth that Europe and North America, they would be not having much of population. Africans would be African continent, the population problem would be much higher than the population of North America and Europe. And the rest of the world, well, rest of the world definitely includes the Asian population of the Asian countries. So it is quite higher than what you can expect. Next, please. Yeah, this is important, environmental impact and income. Now you have a very clearly see that this is what the Kuznets curve is all about. Such a relationship, this figure is showing you, it is self-explanatory in a sense. It's written over here that relationship is called environmental Kuznets curve after Kuznets, who hypothesized and inverted U for the relationship between measure of inequality in the distribution of income and the level of income. Well, this was his first curve that he came up with, but we are talking about the environmental Kuznets curve. And it has been hypothesized that a relationship like that shown in this figure, it holds for many forms of environmental degradation. Next, please. Now you can, next. Oh yes, that was the criticism on the Kuznets curve, environmental Kuznets curve, that you cannot actually add up all kinds of pollutions and then you draw the estimate of how this Kuznets curve could be drawn, because each and every type of pollutant, they have different impacts. I mean, sulfur dioxide, carbon dioxide, whatever these gases are, greenhouse gases, there, and also let's say talk about the particulate matters or the municipal waste, as they have different levels of impacts, negative impacts on the environment. So if we really need to estimate, like for example, these estimates are based on cross-country regression analysis of data from 1980s. And the World Bank came up with each individual pollutants environmental Kuznets curve. So this is very easy if you have got the data of these emissions and the pollutants for a period of time, then you can draw and also forecast too the environmental Kuznets curve. Next, please. This is for sulfur dioxide, which is a very toxic gas in the atmosphere. And you can see that the important thing to be noted is the result for sulfur dioxide is shown in figure, where the turning point is around 3,000 per capita income. Well, if your development has reached to the point where the per capita income is 3,000, then this is supposed to be the maximum level or the maximum level from where the pollution would start coming down, and these are the government or whoever is responsible for development, that entity would have enough resources to spend on the getting rid of this problem of sulfur dioxide in the atmosphere. Next, please. Dr. Saab, how much time do I have now? Because I think I've wasted 15 to 20 minutes.
It depends on you.
Okay.
We have requested you 1 hour, but I think it is already gone.
Yeah, so, but 15 to 20 minutes were lost in between.
Yeah.
I try to finish it as early as possible. Yeah, and two possible shapes of environmental Kuznets curve is a very long run. In the long run, is that this is something which I have already told you about. This is the curve that we can, if we have the data, provided if we have the data, the curve would be like this, that this is the K position, where in case these environmental impacts per unit of income eventually fall to the zero as the level of income rises. Oh, I mean, this is so good that it would come back to that position where we did not have much income. Well, this is something which you need to read it. I don't want to explain it because I don't have much time to explain all the phenomena of this EKC, but it's very interesting to learn about different scenarios of EKC. Next, please. Acha, what I'm trying to say, this was much about the environmental pollution. Now, starting from environmental pollution, the climate change is, in my opinion, it has now cultivated the environmental pollution unchecked, provided it is unchecked in the whole world. It has culminated into the negative impacts of climate change. So these are all mostly, I think not mostly, all of them, they are negative. So no country today is immune from the impacts of climate change. We all know that. The climate change, but climate change and negative impacts, they do not actually remain to environmental pollution issues. They are not attached to it also. But as a maybe previously or in future, this would also result into poverty and inequality. And these are all defining challenges of our time. So, I mean, people are going to lose their livelihoods. They are not going to have food and water, which are the basic amenities, and adverse human capital impacts. They are all related to climate change impacts. So it's a kind of a reversal of development, what climate change is actually bringing for us. And the climate change could drive 216 million people to migrate within their own countries by 2050. This is a highly, I don't say it's an exaggerated figure, but this is most likely that it would happen. But keep this in mind that if nothing is done to check the climate change impacts, the agriculture sector is a core to addressing the climate challenge, because it is actually arising from this sector. Agriculture sector is the mainstay for many economies, but the climate change impacts are coming from this sector, as well as the industrial sector, definitely. But we need to take care of what is happening in the agriculture sector, that it is affecting the climate change. The challenges for developing countries, I think they are more pronounced, and they have longer and they no longer have an opportunity to develop first in a high carbon intensive way, and they clean up and decarbonize later. This is actually not possible for developing countries. They cannot. What I try to say as an environmental student of environmental economics is that now we don't have the luxury of in a period where other countries were not affecting the climate, and we were the one who were industrializing first and had the opportunity in a sense that we had the luxury of polluting the whole environment, and nobody was talking about it. But it's not like that. The countries outside our region, they have already done the damage. And if we think that we will first get developed and then we will decarbonize, then I don't think so we can afford that. So if the policies of developing countries are well-designed policies, I mean, I'm talking about Pakistan because I'm much more concerned about Pakistan. Although we say that we don't have much share in impacting negatively the environment, but it's still, there are many areas in which we can check our this issue of environmental pollution and put in place for low carbon resilient growth, which could also help address poverty and inequality. Okay, this is basically all these matters of deep research need to be done. Next, please. Now, this is very clearly showing what is happening. The World Bank estimated carbon dioxide emission levels. And you can very clearly see that United States, China, all these high tech and high producing countries, they are responsible for more and more emissions of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And developing countries, if they follow the same path of unchecked emissions of carbon dioxide, then they would be contributing into the, I mean, calling the doomsday for the whole world. Next, please. Well, this is something which is very relevant to Pakistan, because these are representative concentration paths, and this is not the factual thing, but what has happened recently is that we have started talking about the average daily maximum temperature, average daily temperature, and the average daily minimum temperature. From maximum to minimum temperature, there are certain the World Bank has come up with, and you can see this and get yourself informed about the on this portal of World Bank, that how they have came up with this representative concentration path. They have defined it very well. So now they are talking about the what have been and what is going to be the average daily maximum temperature. At this, they have actually talked about it for the next, let's say, next 20 years. And oh, it's almost by the end of this century, what could be the scenario? What could be the representative concentration path? Next, please. Yes, this is the figure that this temperature, average annual temperature in Pakistan under the scenario of RCP, what we can see is that RCP 2.6 to 8.5. This is very clearly showing you that historically projected average annual temperature in Pakistan and forecasted, it is going to rise. The temperature is going to rise, and we are going to suffer from the climate change. Now I don't think we are actually having any kind of a problem, in a sense that we are not responsible for this heat wave that we are suffering for the last, let's say, a decade. But probably if the temperature rises in Pakistan also, the atmospheric temperature I'm talking about, then we will also be responsible for it. Next, please. And these are some of the, this is a good picture. I mean, the table, which is showing you that we have been suffering from tropical cyclone, drought, vulnerability, lack of coping capacity, overall informed risk level. These are all climate change impacts. If you see it in a detail, what you will find is that the flood after torrential rains or monsoon rains in the last year, as well as few years back too, the most damaging in terms of overall informed risk level, and then people who got affected, total affected people in millions from the flash flood or the riverine flood and the others. So a lot of people, they have actually lost their livelihoods, and the poverty has increased in this country, in Pakistan, because of this negative impact of climate change. And so we have been talking much more about the flood, but we fail to acknowledge the fact that we have been suffering from the landslides as well. More rain, more torrential rains, and then the landsliding happens. The storm, I mean, a storm is something which happens for a short period of time, but the damages that it creates, I mean, this is something in dollars. You can see that it is tropical cyclones, how much it has done damage to it. So this is the figure which is telling you that climate change negative impacts are the reality of our time now, and Pakistan is not barred from it. Next, please. This is also the pictures. This is our own scenarios. We have last year, we saw all these pictures in all kinds of media. I mean, it was published in newspapers, and we came we came to know that the population exposed to extreme flood, that was in 1971 to 2004, and then population which is going to be exposed to extreme flood and increase in the affected population, then it's higher and higher. ठीक है, जो estimated figures हैं 16.7 percentile and then median. What I'm trying to say is that look at the severity of the impacts of climate change. And the poor people, actually, they get displaced, they have to migrate from their places, and then their livelihoods are lost. So it becomes a huge problem, which is already a poverty-driven country. Next, please. And the impact on the economic sector, people definitely gets affected. But what happens to the agriculture sector? The direct effects are alterations to the carbon dioxide availability, precipitation, and temperatures. And the indirect effects are the impacts on the water resources availability, soil organic matter transformation, change in pest and diseases profiles, and the arrival of invasive species. And this is so much devastating for the agriculture sector. And we cannot hope for a good agriculture produce in the coming years because of all these direct and indirect effects of climate change. As we know that the agriculture workforce is 38.57%, it could be a variable, but it is around like this. And GDP is 22%, it could be +1 and -2. I mean, it is around this 22%. Temperature rises 0.5 degree to 2 degrees Celsius, 8 to 10 loss in the yield. If the temperature rises, then we have the economic impact is that we are going to lose the yield from 8 to 10%, which is a huge amount. Rice and sugarcane, the flood of 2010, what happened? 25% and 20% yield reductions of rice and sugarcane, respectively. So there were 2.4 million hectares of unharvested crops. They were lost and worth of $5.1 billion US. So these are all the damages that we have already incurred in the previous years. So the same is with the urban and energy sector. So these are all, as I said before, something which is very drastically impacting us. Next. So these are some of the policies and the institutions which are responsible to mitigate the negative impacts. Nationally determined contribution to Paris Climate Agreement. Paris Climate Agreement is something which is is not actually active. The document that we submitted, but nothing much is happening in that area. Technology needs assessment for climate change adaptation. Well, the government of Pakistan has completed these policies in March 2016. What is happening to the implementation? I don't think so. Some improvement has been witnessed. National Disaster Risk Reduction Policy, it is active. Active means that it is working. Climate change, National Climate Change Policy is active, and the National Communication to the UNFCCC, it has submitted. The reports have been submitted. Latest was August 2019. What I'm trying to say is that, well, at the national level, the government is trying to do something about it, to reverse the impacts of negative impacts of climate change. So, well, something is better than nothing. But if these policies, my argument would be that if these policies and plans, they do not have any kind of a well-researched base attached to it, or evidence-based, if these policies are not evidence-based policies, well-researched policies, then I don't think so the objectives of these policies would be achieved very effectively or efficiently. Next, please. Yeah, this is, I think, the climax of my presentation, which I thought that would be interesting. The importance and significance of inclusion of education in sustainable environmental and climate change, informal education system and research. I think we all understand this. I mean, I do not need to emphasize more now that it is the, I think it is for us, it has become imperative that we need to take it very seriously, these issues, and make it a part of. Now, one thing which I need to make clear is that I'm actually not talking about environmental economics per se, or the sustainable economics per se, or the climate change economics, because as I said, I had made it very clear that these areas of research and teaching, they are not confined to economics. They are basically interdependent. Interdisciplinary approach needs to be adopted. It's not only economics, because it has to do something with the sociology, psychology, also with the physical, biological sciences. We need to know the basics of the physical sciences. We need to understand what thermodynamics are. We need to understand the ecology of the environment. So this is the beauty of this this course would be the environmental economics, that it encompasses other areas as well. So the role of education, investment in sustainable development, it has attracted more and more attention from the academic community. I hope I'm not wrong about it. Actually, education can reduce, as I have mentioned here, carbon emissions, and designing a comprehensive policy framework to define sustainable development is an issue facing most countries worldwide. So international experience, it shows that education and the sustainable development, they're closely linked, and that environmental education is integral to achieving sustainable development. And the environment, have I left something? Next, please. Environmental education is a vital to winning the fight against climate change. Yes, it is, because environmental education has an impact on environmental quality. Some studies, they have found that educational institutions are increasingly important in driving sustainable development. And an economist studied the historical development of environmental education, and I think her name is Namura, yeah, in Indonesia, and found that education for sustainable development, it plays an important role in social, political, politics and cultural freedom, and poverty eradication as well. There is a group of economists, Zafar et al. Empirically, they verified that the environmental quality of a region is significantly affected by the education level of resident. So getting higher education, it can help students to rethink the role of human beings on the planet to deal with the significant challenges related to the sustainability. As Tiero et al., I think this is an Italian economist who surveyed 1,257 around, let's say 1,300 students from Portuguese and from public higher education institutions through online questionnaire. And they found that most students with education in sustainable development are more concerned about climate change and are more inclined to reuse and reduce and recycle the waste. And another group of students, they contribute to the sustainable development by practicing in activities organized by the environmental organizations or higher education institutions, such as environmental protection or community volunteering. So based on the Australian higher education data from 1950 to 2014, Balaguer and Canterville found that the increase in per capita income and education level has been proven to be effective in reducing pollution. So this is what I had to say all about the importance of environmental education. But there are certain influencing mechanisms of environmental and climate change education. Next, please. Investment in environmental education can be regarded as an input element of production. Why I'm saying that, being the economist myself and the student of economics, and those who are listening to me, they would say that they would know that many scholars, they have analyzed the transmission mechanism of environmental education to sustainable development from green consumption and pollution control perspective. So from the standpoint of the consumption, some scholars, very relevant scholars, they have found that the environmental education can enhance the awareness of green consumption. So, I mean, the economists would talk in terms of consumption and production, as we know that. So the low carbon economy is the dominant choice for human society to solve the dilemma of this environmental governance. So it is basically all about the governance system as well. If the governance system is working well, then but the prerequisite should be the environmental education can impact consumers' willingness to consume green products by influencing consumers' environmental ethics and also the moral obligations and environmental attitudes. I mean, until unless we are not ourselves educated about it, then it is very difficult to influence the others to follow the suit. So what are the three conclusions that this is a very good the good publication, Frontiers of Public Health. It was published in 2023. You can find it written by some of the Chinese scholars, and you can find it very easily on internet. The conclusions that a robust regression analysis of the model that these Chinese scholars have used is that first, the environmental education will significantly reduce the environmental pollution index, while supported by the benchmark regression coefficients of. So they have very technically by the use of the technical model, they have come up with this conclusions that environmental pollution index would significantly reduce if we provide environmental education to our students. And second, from the perspective of the green consumption and green production channels, with the improvement of residents' consumption level, the promotional effect of environmental education, the progress of environmental quality shows a downward trend. Next, please. The third, the environmental education legislation could be accelerated from the perspective of legal regulations. And it was also revealed that there is uncertainty about pollution control and improving environmental quality. This is also one side of the coin as well. So with the improvement of the pollution index of the region itself, the role of pollution control is getting smaller and smaller. Why? The question is why it is so. Because this is the indicator of the environmental governance issues in areas with higher pollution levels, and where it is very passive. So it also means that environmental education should be carried out first. If we introduced environmental education at every level of education, and I'm interested in the higher level of education, then it should be carried out first to avoid passive responses when environmental pollution is severe. Because we have already taught our students, we have already made them aware of the what these climate change impacts, what these environmental pollution impacts are on the society, on the economy as a whole, then they would be much more geared to give their response and come up with the solution to all kinds of problems. Next, please. Yes, this is what the economic growth drives the improvement of environmental education. I think it's very clearly you can see that this figure is what this figure is telling us about is that the economic growth, it drives the improvement of environmental education. In environmental education, it raises the awareness of the residents, resident awareness of the environmental protection, and the resident resisted pollution and forced the government to implement environmental legislation and control environmental pollutants. But at the same time, as consumption upgrades, consumption becomes more and more prominent in green consumption and ecological consumption, which promotes green production, ecological production, green ecological production, yes, which is conducive to reducing pollutant emissions during production and improving environmental quality. So the improvement of environmental quality provides a good atmosphere for production and consumption. So it becomes very conducive to accumulating human capital, which acts as the production process and promotes economic growth. So educating the students, young people, young minds, the environmental issues and environmental education, it becomes very easy to have the improved environmental quality. And this is like basically what we are trying to make the human capital much more responsive. Both the digital economy and the sustainable development, they are conducive to the endogenous growth of the economy through the accumulation of human capital, which is also a higher form of the economic growth mode. That is to realize the upgrading and transformation of the economic development mode. So there is a general agreement. So what is the contribution of economics? As I said previously, that it is an interdisciplinary approach that we need to adopt if we are working from the angle of economist. But the contribution of economics is, what we say is that climate change is one of the most serious environmental problems. This is what economics has made us aware of. The analysis of climate change is confronted with large degree of uncertainty. Yes, this is very important, that there is a huge uncertainty attached to the climate change issues. Uncertainty in a means that climate is a very uncertain. I mean, you do not know whether this year you are going to be faced with the heat wave or not. Is this winter season is going to be harsh or not? What is going to happen? But definitely the extreme weather conditions would be eventually there to make you uncomfortable, and definitely has very important negative impacts on the economy as well. So if these uncertainties need to be taken into account to arrive at a meaningful policy recommendation. So under various uncertain scenarios, the research needs to be done and the outcome needs to be forecasted for a very meaningful policy recommendation. Many economic, environmental, and integrated assessments models, they are deterministic, and there is clear concept of the implications of the uncertainties for practical policy making. So this is a matter of actually doing a proper research, taking into account the uncertain aspects of impacts of climate change. Yeah, climate change and uncertainty is clearly an issue for interdisciplinary research. So the main contribution of economics is to provide formal framework and techniques for analyzing climate policy in the context of the uncertainty. It was told to us by the Samstead and Greening, a very good work that they have done and published in 1998. So, in the cascade of uncertainties, economics can contribute to the, have already contributed much, but would be doing its quantification, assessment, resolution of uncertainties concerning emission scenarios as they depend to the large degree on economic development, the economic impacts of climate change, and the cost of slowing climate change. So economics has a very important role to be played. And besides quantifying and resolving the existing uncertainties, the main contribution of the economics to analyze the distributional and allocative impacts of given climate policies and to determine optimal reduction strategies in the presence of uncertainty. So I would like to recommend, my main recommendation would be that for research, for the policies to be adopted by the government for environmental issues and the sustainable development, they need to have collaborative work with the academia. And in the academia, in the academic institutions, research institutions, they need to teach their students how to tackle these problems as economists, and how to we need to actually train them in these issues, and that would be a much more contribution from our side, who are the academics in higher education and research. Yes, please.
Very much thankful to you to give us your previous time in this condition of the health.
It was my commitment, and I wanted to fulfill this commitment anyhow, irrespective of so many impediments, the internet connection, my health, my voice, everything. But I think I have made my point, hopefully.
Yeah, thank you, Emma. You have taught the history of the economics and environmental economics as well, and also highlighted the main issues which are facing the world and specific for Pakistan. Now the floor
And
is
the,
open for questions. Ji, please.
and the importance of the environmental education.
Yeah, sure. Now the floor is open for questions.
Okay.
Yes, Mr. Wakas.
Can you hear me, sir?
Ji, please.
I have a question from Dr. Samina Khalil. Ma'am, it's a great honor for us to listen to you on this topic. First of all, thank you very much. Secondly, ma'am, coming from the research perspective, as we know that Pakistan government is not implementing policies that's relevant to the climate change. So to design a policy to maintain the green environment, as a student, what you will suggest that from where I should take a start in case of the Pakistan? Should I take start from the digitalization in education, income? You have talked about the HDI, or we should take a start from the digitalization in the industry to maintain the climate. You have presented a top model relevant to the environment, how to take the how we can manage the environment growth, but it is a general model, or we can present it or follow it in case of the Pakistan. So please guide it about it.
I'm sorry, are you a student or are you working somewhere?
Actually, I'm working in Center of for Economic Planning and Development and Research Assistant in Minhaj University, and so far I am doing this job right now as a researcher.
Okay. And you said that there is no climate change policies of the government of Pakistan? I think there is a
policies are there, but they are not implementing. They are not implementing the policies productively. There is a gap.
No, actually, Waqas, what I would like to inform you is that the policy is definitely there. But you see, policies in bullet forms that we need to do this and this and this and this in bullet form this policy is definitely going to be very ineffective because there is no proper mechanism involved in it. If I say that if any policy says that we need to adopt uh, a policy which like educating the young people at the school level, how you're going to do it? There has to be a mechanism to it, right?
Right.
So without any kind of mechanism, the policy is kind of something which is you're not seriously have done it. Adoption of any kind of policy needs to come in combination with the mechanism how to do it. And if these people, those who are at the helm of affairs, those who have done this, came up with this policy, they have they themselves do not know how to do it, then this policy is going to be very ineffective. I don't think so this policy has any place, in my view, for effectiveness or for anything else. I mean, there is no mechanism attached to it. So I think the government has to rethink about environmental and the climate change policy, and they actually need some good research work to be attached with it. And the research work basically means we don't even have the proper data for the environmental pollution indicators, as well as other climate change indicators. Do we have a time series data with
No,
us?
ma'am.
So if the problem is that we do not even contain, we just have some kind of data available with the World Bank, and but that is also not a proper data. So if the government is really serious about it, they need to first adopt or need to settle a kind of a data bank for all very important vital indicators of pollution as well as climate change. Unless, I mean, we researcher and you as a research assistant, how you're going to work on a policy if you do not have the proper data on it?
Yes, ma'am.
So this is what my contention is, that we in Pakistan are very seriously lagging behind all kind of proper work on the environmental pollution and climate change impacts. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay,
How
ma'am.
many?
I have a very simple question
Yes.
related to the Pakistan. Keeping in view the Kuznets curve, we are at which place? Did we reach at the peak or not yet? Or if not reached, then what is the expected time that will reach the peak?
Not at all. We have not even very close to the peak now. You know what is happening in this country is that the economic activities for the last, what should I say, for the last 1 decade, probably. So I think I would forecast that we would need at least 20 more years to reach to the peak of development. And then from there, it would come down. Because you see, the economic development or the sustainable development, it needs the stability, all sorts, like the political stability is attached with the sustainable development. And if we do not have political stability, the economic stability is not going to come. So we are in a kind of some kind of a doldrums now. So to think about reaching to that height of development, from there on, we would have enough resources to spend on the environmental pollution. That is why we say that we are not responsible for these climate change impacts, because we are neither we are producing nor we are taking part into polluting the environment of such level that we would say that because of our production level, we have damaged the whole environment and we are basically causing the climate change impacts. It's not like that. So hopefully I would just hope and pray that the pace of our development after economic political stability would be, we I pray that we adopt those policies which would take us off from stalemate to development much faster than we expect.
If we take the policies of the international community, like
Yeah.
cause theorem, which says that polluters should be penalized or should place taxes on the polluters to compensate the victims. Now, if we put the taxes on the production side, then our cost of production will be increased.
Right.
So how can we compete in the international market?
No, we have the national standards of pollutants. What level of pollutants you are allowed to pollute, right, in the atmosphere. But if you go beyond that level, which is dangerous, then you are going to be penalized. The producer is going to be penalized. They know it very well. The policy makers needs to make them understand that there is a level at which I think we are much below that level as well. Our production levels are not higher. We have not reached to that. I mean, that could be something which we are losing out in terms of having revenues collected from that taxation, that taxes. We don't have even taxes, basically an economic instrument to penalize. We still have the command and control kind of instruments that are there, like charges. But the system is working not very properly to even charge those polluters who are making, like, for example, water pollution coming out of the industrial sector and coming out of those informal sectors production activities, intermediate production activities. So they are just they are going scot-free. They are polluting relentlessly and nobody is checking them.
Yeah.
So we need to see our situation in perspective. I mean, we cannot, internationally, we are being emphasized to do something about our pollution because it is affecting our health actually. We are not affecting the health of the uh, other nations, right? We are affecting the health of our own nation, our own soils, our own self. Like, for example, when I have been living, I have lived in the very severe cold conditions in US, in Canada, as well as in UK. But I feel very healthy. I never had this sore throat problem, this chest infection problem, lungs infection problem, because why I get into all these kind of health problems in Pakistan, especially in Karachi, because we have a highly polluted environment here. When the temperature goes down and it's winter time, I have this, this problem arises in me and I go on the antibiotics. And antibiotic, as you know, it's not good for health. You cannot use it for a long time. But for me, it's like 1 month of bad health. And I remain on antibiotic. And otherwise, even I'm not able to, speak. You cannot hear my voice if I don't eat, if I don't take antibiotic. So did it make any sense?
Okay, Dr. Samina, thank you very much for your very valuable time, and especially in this condition of health. And I am also thankful to the participants, and special thanks to the management of the CEPD and the School of Economics and Finance for organizing this wonderful and very informative session with Dr. Samina Khalil. And thank you very much again, Dr. Samina.
Thank you, Dr. Tayyab. Thanks again.
Thank
Hope to see you again.
Inshallah.
Maybe in good health next time.
Inshallah.
Okay.
Thank you very much again.